Some people spend their entire lives loving someone who never once looked at them the way they needed to be seen.
And the most heartbreaking part, sometimes that person is standing right next to them every single day. This is Sandra's story. Santa Barbara, California, late August. The kind of golden afternoon that makes you believe anything is possible, where the Pacific breeze rolls through palm trees and the whole world smells like sunscreen and new beginnings. Hundreds of freshmen are flooding the University of California campus for orientation, dragging overstuffed suitcases and wearing the nervous smiles of people pretending they aren't terrified. Among them is Sandra Owens, 22 years old, warm brown eyes, long braids she styles with quiet care, and a laugh so bright it could stop traffic. She grew up in Los Angeles in a household full of gospel music and Sunday dinners where her grandpa's family packed around a table and love was spoken in the language of fried chicken, greens, and pumpkin pie. Sandra knew what it meant to feel deeply. She always had. She just hadn't yet met the person who would teach her how much that could hurt. She doesn't see him coming. Nobody ever does. His name is Wilson Carter. Sandy blonde hair, easy smile. The kind of genuine that you can't fake and can't ignore. He grew up near San Diego, backyard barbecues, baseball games with his dad on Sundays, a quiet suburban life that made him steady and sure of himself in ways that Sandra would spend years quietly admiring. He is majoring in engineering. He builds things. He fixes things. And as fate, or the university housing office would have it, Wilson Carter is Sandra's neighbor on the same dorm wing. Their first conversation lasts maybe 4 minutes, but something clicks. The kind of click you feel in your chest before your brain has the chance to explain it. By the first week of fall quarter, they are already greeting each other by name every morning. "Morning, Sandra," he'd say, easy as breathing, and Sandra's cheeks would go warm before she even had time to stop them. By the second week, they are sharing textbooks. By the third, they are eating lunch together under the oak trees, trading stories about where they came from and who they wanted to become. One afternoon, Sandra is struggling down the hallway with an impossible stack of engineering and literature books, because of course she is taking both, and Wilson appears like a solution she didn't know she was looking for. "Need a hand with that?" 4 words. Simple. And when he cracked a joke about the weight and she laughed, really laughed, the tension of that whole hectic day just dissolved. Just like that. This is how it starts, not with fireworks, with small, ordinary moments that quietly rearrange everything. To the outside world, they are just best friends. Wilson sees Sandra as the smartest, kindest person he knows. She helps him polish his essays. He explains complicated things with a patience that makes her feel capable instead of lost. They spend afternoons under the oak trees, sunlight filtering through the leaves, building something neither of them has a name for yet, or at least only one of them does. Because somewhere between the shared textbooks and the midnight study sessions and the way his laugh fills a room, Sandra Owens falls completely, helplessly, irrevocably in love with Wilson Carter, and he has absolutely no idea. That is the part that will keep her up at night for years. Her roommate Ebony sees it almost immediately. Quick-witted, loyal, and constitutionally incapable of pretending not to notice things, Ebony watches Sandra's face change every time Wilson's name comes up. One evening after a study session, Ebony leans over and says, plain as anything, "You two make a cute couple, you know." Sandra's face goes scarlet. She changes the subject so fast she nearly gives herself whiplash. But Ebony just winks. A few nights later, walking back from class in the dark, Ebony leans in softly and says, "I know you like him." And Sandra, caught, exposed, heart pounding, whispers back, "I know," and laughs it off like it's nothing, like it isn't everything. But here is where the story tightens. Here is where it starts to ache. Wilson is not looking for a girlfriend. When other girls ask him out, he shrugs it off easily. "I'm not looking for that right now." And Sandra smiles and says, "That's fine. I'm happy just being friends," and means neither of those things even slightly. She goes back to her dorm and hums R&B softly to herself, or throws herself into the piano until her fingers remember what peace feels like. She tucks her love somewhere safe and silent, wraps it up neatly, and carries it like something precious she is terrified to drop. 4 years. Every laugh. Every late night in the library. Every time he squeezes her shoulder and says, "Thanks, Sandy, I couldn't have done this without you," and means it as a friend. Every time she almost says the 3 words and swallows them back down. 4 years of loving someone who sees you completely and still doesn't see you at all. So here is the question I want you to sit with before we go any further into this story, because it matters more than you think. If you had spent years loving your closest friend in silence, terrified that speaking the truth would cost you the most important relationship in your life, would you have stayed quiet too? She made a decision that most people would never have the strength to make. She decided to stay, not to confess, not to walk away, not to give herself the mercy of distance or the relief of honesty. Sandra Owens looked at the situation with clear, steady eyes. A boy who didn't know, a friendship too precious to gamble, a heart too full to empty. And she chose the hardest road of all. She chose to love Wilson Carter in silence, up close, every single day, with no guarantee that it would ever amount to anything more than what it already was. And if you think that sounds like the safe choice, like the easy choice, then you have never tried to sit across from someone you love and pretend that you don't. Because here is what nobody tells you about loving someone in secret. It isn't one big dramatic moment of pain. It isn't a single sharp wound you can tend to and heal. It is 1,000 small cuts, so gentle and so precise that by the time you notice you are bleeding, the habit of it has already become part of who you are. It becomes your normal. And Sandra's normal, for 4 years of college and 7 years of adult life, was this: loving Wilson Carter more than she could measure, and making sure he never once had a reason to suspect it. That takes a particular kind of strength, and a particular kind of loneliness. Let's go back, because the story of how Sandra held on is just as important as the story of what she was holding on for. Sophomore year arrives the way all sophomore years do, with the false confidence of someone who survived freshman year and now believes they understand things. The campus feels smaller, more familiar. Sandra and Wilson have settled into a rhythm that looks, from the outside, like the most uncomplicated friendship in the world. They have inside jokes now. They have a table, their table, under the oak trees, where they eat lunch 3 days a week when their schedules align. Wilson has started bringing her coffee without being asked, because he knows she likes it with oat milk and just enough sugar to take the edge off. Sandra has memorized the exact tone of his voice when he is stressed about a deadline versus when he is just pretending to be stressed for sympathy. She knows the difference. She always knows the difference. And that is the thing about loving someone from up close. You learn them. Not the version of them they present to the world, but the actual architecture of who they are. The way Wilson bites the inside of his cheek when he is thinking hard. The way he goes quiet, not cold, when something is bothering him, and how he needs about 20 minutes of comfortable silence before he will actually talk about it. The way his whole face changes when he is genuinely laughing versus being polite. Sandra knew all of it. She had been cataloguing him for years without meaning to, the way you absorb music you love, not because you are trying to memorize it, but because some things just get inside you and stay. And Wilson? Wilson knew Sandra too, in his own way. He knew she was the most reliable person in his life. He knew that if he texted her at 2 in the morning with a half-formed anxiety about a project, she would respond with something that was somehow both practical and funny and exactly right. He knew that her laugh, the real one, not the polite one, sounded like something worth working for. He knew that she made every room she walked into feel slightly warmer, slightly safer, slightly more like a place where good things could happen. He knew all of this. He catalogued none of it. He simply took it in the way you take in sunlight, gratefully, unconsciously, without ever stopping to ask what you would do if it disappeared. That asymmetry, that beautiful, brutal asymmetry, that is the engine of this entire story. Now here is where the tension starts to build in a way that Sandra was not prepared for. Halfway through sophomore year, Wilson starts dating someone. Her name is Allison. She is a pre-med student from Oregon. Gentle, athletic, with a ponytail that bounces when she walks and a laugh that is perfectly pleasant and completely inoffensive in every way. She and Wilson meet at a campus volleyball tournament, and within 2 weeks they are walking across campus holding hands. Sandra hears about it first from Ebony, who delivers the news with the careful, watchful expression of a person carrying something fragile. "So, Wilson has a girlfriend," Ebony says, watching Sandra's face the way you watch a candle in a windstorm. Sandra's face does not flicker, not even once. "Oh, that's great," Sandra says, and her voice is so even, so genuinely warm, that Ebony almost believes her. Almost. That night, alone in her dorm room with the lights low and her phone face down on the desk, Sandra sits at her piano and plays. She plays for a long time. She plays through the ache of it, through the specific humiliating pain of hearing that the person you love has chosen someone else, not because of anything you did wrong, but simply because they do not know you are available to be chosen. She plays until her fingers ache, and when she finally stops, she sits in the silence and makes herself another decision. She would not become someone who resents Wilson for living his life. She would not let this love curdle into something bitter and consuming. She loved him, which meant she wanted him to be happy, even if that happiness had nothing to do with her. She closed the piano lid gently, like she was closing something else, and went to bed. The next morning, she asked Wilson how the date went. And she meant it. Can you imagine doing that? Can you genuinely sit with that for a moment? Asking the person you love to tell you about their date, and listening with real attention, and laughing in the right places, and meaning it when you say you hope it goes well. Because Sandra did that. For months. She listened to Wilson talk about Allison with the patience of someone who had decided that his happiness was worth more than her comfort. She watched them together on campus with a smile she had practiced, until it no longer felt like a performance. And every single night, she came back to her dorm room and tucked the ache somewhere it wouldn't show. Ebony watched all of this with a kind of awed, helpless admiration. "You are either the most selfless person I have ever met," Ebony told her one evening, "or the most stubborn." Sandra laughed and said she was pretty sure it was both. Ebony didn't argue. "Here is a question worth sitting with, and I want you to really think about it. Is loving someone in silence an act of selflessness, or is it a slow, quiet way of disappearing?" Because Sandra was disappearing, not dramatically, not in any way that anyone would notice from the outside. She was still the girl with the bright laugh and the long braids, and the way of making every person she talked to feel like the most important person in the room. She was still showing up, still present, still wholly and recognizably herself. But inside, in the private architecture of her own heart, she was quietly, systematically setting aside every instinct that told her to speak, every impulse toward honesty, every moment of vulnerability that tried to surface and was gently, firmly pushed back down. She was editing herself, not her personality, but her need. And the cost of that editing, compounded daily, was something she would not fully understand for years. Allison and Wilson break up at the end of sophomore year. It happens quietly, without drama. They had grown in different directions, Wilson tells Sandra over coffee one morning, and Sandra nods with the sympathetic expression of a best friend, and does not allow herself to feel the small, shameful flutter of relief in her chest for more than 3 seconds. 3 seconds. That is all she permits. Then she puts her coffee cup down and asks Wilson if he is okay, and she means that too. Junior year arrives with the momentum of a story picking up speed. And then comes Tina. If Allison was a candle, Tina is a flame. She is a computer science major from Houston, vibrant, sharp, funny in the fast-talking way that fills a room from wall to wall. She and Wilson meet at a hackathon in October, bond over a shared contempt for inefficient code, and within a month they are inseparable. Wilson is animated around Tina in a way that Sandra notices immediately, because Sandra notices everything. He talks faster, he laughs louder. He has the lit-up, slightly distracted energy of someone who is thinking about someone else, even when they are right in front of you. Sandra knows that energy. She invented that energy. This time, it is harder. She will not lie to you about that, and I will not lie to you on her behalf. Because Tina is not unpleasant, and Tina is not wrong for Wilson, and that is the worst part of it. It would be so much easier if Tina were easy to dislike, if she were careless with Wilson, or unkind to Sandra, or somehow obviously wrong. But Tina is sharp and warm and good, and Wilson looks genuinely happy. And Sandra has to find the strength not just to endure this, but to be glad about it. Because that is what she signed up for when she decided to stay. When you love someone the way Sandra loved Wilson, their joy becomes non-negotiable. You don't get to resent it. You don't get to compete with it. You just hold it alongside your own longing and learn to carry both. She laughs at Tina's jokes when they are all together. She tells Wilson that Tina seems great. She means it enough that it counts. And late at night, when the dorm is quiet and Ebony is asleep, Sandra pulls her knees to her chest and stays very still with the weight of it, breathing through the ache the way you breathe through physical pain, steadily, deliberately, waiting for it to pass. But here is where something shifts. Something small and significant. One night in the library, it is close to midnight, the kind of late that makes everything feel slightly unreal, where the fluorescent lights hum a little too loudly and the world outside the windows is just black glass. Sandra and Wilson are working side by side on their respective projects. Wilson is halfway through an engineering paper and deeply, visibly stressed, the kind of stressed where his pen keeps tapping against the desk and he keeps reading the same paragraph over and over without it landing. Sandra finishes her own work, slides it into her bag, and without being asked, pulls his paper toward her and starts reading. She rewrites 2 paragraphs. She restructures his argument. She hands it back without making a thing of it, and Wilson reads it over and gets very quiet in the way he gets when something has genuinely moved him. "Sandra," he says, looking up at her, and for just a moment, in the particular quiet of midnight and fluorescent light and the hum of the library, there is something in his voice that Sandra cannot name. Something that sits just outside the border of friendship and asks a question she is not sure either of them is ready to answer. "Thanks, Sandy," he says. "I couldn't have done this without you." And he reaches over and ruffles her hair with the easy affection of someone who has no idea what they just almost said. And Sandra smiles, and tucks the almost moment somewhere safe, and says, "That's what I'm here for." She nearly whispered the 3 words that night. She will think about that for a long time afterward. What would have happened if she had? What would Wilson have said in that particular midnight quiet, with gratitude still warm in his chest and something unnameable sitting just under the surface? We don't know. Sandra didn't say it, but the question is worth asking. Because sometimes the moments we don't take are the ones that haunt us longest. Tina and Wilson break up at the end of junior year. Again, no drama, just 2 people who cared about each other, discovering that caring isn't always enough to make a direction work. Wilson is quieter about it this time, more private, more internally focused in the way that means he is genuinely processing something. Sandra gives him space first, then presence, in exactly the right proportion. She shows up with coffee and doesn't push him to talk until he is ready. When he finally is, she listens. When he finally laughs again, she laughs with him. This is what she does. This is who she is to him. And the thing is, Wilson knows it. He knows, in the unexamined way that people know things they have never had to question, that Sandra is the most constant thing in his world. He just doesn't know what to do with that information yet. Senior year. The last chapter of the campus story. And the clock is ticking. Senior year has a specific quality to it that anyone who has lived it will recognize. A kind of heightened awareness, like someone has turned up the saturation on everything. The oak trees look more beautiful. The campus paths feel more precious. Every ordinary afternoon carries the faint, melancholy weight of being one of the last ordinary afternoons like this. Sandra feels it sharply. Because for her, this year is not just the end of college. It is the end of proximity, the end of morning greetings and shared tables and midnight libraries, and the easy, constant nearness of Wilson Carter. After graduation, the world will scatter them, and whatever this is, whatever she has been carrying, will have to survive distance. Or not. She throws herself into senior year with everything she has. Student council, choir, study sessions, campus events. She is present and joyful and entirely, deliberately alive in every moment she has left in this particular version of her life. And Wilson is right beside her for all of it. They go to the senior bonfire together, sitting on a low wall watching the flames while the rest of their class whoops and laughs around them. They pull an all-nighter before finals week, Actual finals, the real ones, the last ones, surrounded by empty coffee cups and highlighted notes, and the particular camaraderie of people who are exhausted and terrified and completely in it together. They go to 3 different senior celebrations, and at each one, Sandra catches Ebony watching her with the quiet, searching look of someone waiting for a decision to be made. But no decision comes, because Sandra is not ready, or maybe because she is too ready, and the fear of that is overwhelming. And maybe, if we are being honest, because part of her is still convinced that the answer will be no, and she would rather carry the maybe forever than live inside a definitive no. Can you understand that? Can you understand choosing the comfortable uncertainty of an unlived dream over the terrifying clarity of actually reaching for it? Because that is a very human thing to do. And Sandra is nothing if not deeply, honestly human. The last day of finals, May sunshine. The air smells like spring blossoms and endings, and the particular sweetness of something that is about to change forever. Students are spilling out of. Buildings all across campus, loud and relieved, and collectively exhaling 4 years of pressure in one long, glorious breath. Sandra finds Wilson on the campus steps, because of course she does, because this is their story and some things are inevitable, and when she sees him, he is holding the yearbook she brought him and laughing at his own entry, most likely to become a CEO. He does a mock salute at it, and she shakes her head and tells him not to forget the little people when he is famous, and he clicks his tongue and tells her he already looked up her entry, most spirited teacher in the making, and the way he says it, the warmth and the pride in it, makes her chest ache in the most exquisite way. She has something for him. She has been carrying it for weeks. A graduation card, handwritten, specific, honest in all the ways that she has never allowed herself to be out loud. Not quite a confession, but closer to the truth than anything she has ever handed him directly. She pulls it out of her bag. Her hand is not entirely steady. "Here," she says softly. "Remember to call me, okay?" Her fingers brush his as she passes it. The contact is brief, electric. He doesn't notice. He smiles, warm, proud, certain, and says, "Always, Sandy," and pulls her into a hug that she holds for exactly 1 second longer than she should. Then she lets go, because that is what she always does. She lets go. She watches him walk toward the car, the card in his hand, a promise to stay in touch trailing behind him like smoke. And here is the question I need you to sit with right now, because it is the question that drives the next 7 years of Sandra's life. If you gave someone a piece of your heart and they accepted it as a friendly gesture, if they took the most honest thing you ever offered and filed it under friendship without ever reading between the lines, would you tell them what they missed? Or would you let them walk away and wonder for years whether they would have chosen differently if they had known what they were holding? Sandra lets him walk away. Now we move forward. Because the story doesn't pause here, even though Sandra's heart wants it to. Life has an indifferent momentum that does not accommodate grief, and Sandra Owens is not the kind of woman who lets grief win. She packs up her dorm room. She drives back to Los Angeles. She starts building her life, the one that belongs to her, not to the version of herself that exists in relation to Wilson Carter. She earns her teaching credential. She finds an apartment in Pasadena with a small balcony and a view of the San Gabriel Mountains. She decorates her future classroom with colorful posters of books and quotes, because she has always believed that the right words at the right time can change the entire trajectory of a life. She is not wrong about that. She will prove it to herself eventually. And Wilson. Wilson moves north. Silicon Valley swallows him whole and spits him back out as something remarkable, sharp, driven, burning with the particular ambition of someone who has always known what they were built for. He rents a tiny apartment near the Golden Gate Bridge and codes until 2, 3, 4 in the morning, fueled by coffee and the specific hunger of a person who needs to make something real out of all the ideas crowding their head. Within 3 years, he is a CEO. Conferences, board meetings, his name in tech publications next to words like visionary and disruption, and the next generation of his life becomes large and loud and full of people who admire what he has built, and still, in the quiet spaces between the noise, in the 2 a.m. lull after a coding session when the apartment is dark, and the bridge lights are flickering over the bay, Wilson Carter thinks about Sandra Owens, not in a way he has language for yet, not in a way he would know how to explain to anyone who asked, just a low, persistent awareness. Like a frequency. He can't tune out, like a song he knows all the words to without remembering when he learned them. He sees her post from a school science fair. Her students crowded around a project display. Sandra in the background with her hands clapped together and her whole face alight. And he lies in the dark staring at his phone screen with something warm and unexamined sitting in the center of his chest. He hits like. He waits until morning to text. That science fair looked amazing. Congratulations to your class. Friendly. Appropriate. Completely insufficient for what he is actually feeling, though he does not know that yet. Sandra reads the text the next morning over her cup of tea, and she smiles the smile of someone who has learned to be grateful for exactly what they are given and nothing more. She texts back something warm and funny and asks how his latest product launch went. He responds immediately, more immediately than a busy CEO probably should, though neither of them comments on that. Their texting rhythms are easy and comfortable, a continuation of a language they developed in college that neither of them has forgotten. They text during holidays. They react to each other's posts. They exist in each other's peripheral vision across the distance of 700 miles and 7 years of separate lives, and neither of them says what they mean, and neither of them stops reaching out, and the question that hangs over all of it, unasked, unanswered, accumulating weight with every passing year, what is this exactly? What are we doing? What are we waiting for? Years 2 and 3 come and go. Sandra's classroom is thriving. She is the kind of teacher that students remember for decades, the kind whose words show up in graduation speeches and thank you letters sent years after the fact. She is building something real and meaningful with her life, and she knows it, and it sustains her. But sustenance is not the same as completion. And Sandra, in the quiet of her apartment on evenings when the marking is done and the balcony is dark and the city hums below her, still carries something unresolved. She looks at old photos on her phone sometimes, campus trees, shared lunches, Wilson's face caught mid-laugh in a dozen different settings, and she wonders. Still, after all this time, she wonders. Years 4 and 5, Wilson's company doubles in size. Sandra publishes a literacy article in a regional education journal that makes a quiet but real impact in her field. They celebrate each other's wins from a distance, through screens and text notifications and the occasional long phone call that stretches past midnight. Those calls are the truest version of what they still are to each other, two people who slip back into their own particular frequency the moment they start talking, who remember all the same things and laugh at all the same memories, and somehow always end up in the deep end of the conversation without meaning to. There is a phone call in year 5, a long one, somewhere around 11 at night, where they talk about loneliness, not their own, specifically. They talk around it, abstractly, philosophically, in the way that two intelligent people discuss something that is actually about themselves by pretending it is about the world. When they hang up, Sandra sits for a long time in the silence of her apartment, and Wilson, in his San Francisco penthouse, sets his phone down on the kitchen counter and stares at the bay for a while without quite knowing why. Year 6 arrives like a quiet escalation. Sandra's students nominate her for a regional teaching award. Wilson closes a funding round that makes the front page of 3 different tech publications. Ebony, who is now a journalist at a digital magazine in LA, and just as perceptive and irreverent as she was in college, takes Sandra to dinner to celebrate both milestones and watches her friend with the patient, knowing look of someone who has been waiting for a specific thing to happen for a very long time. "Do you ever think about him?" Ebony asks, with the directness that only a truly old friend can deploy, without it landing like an accusation. Sandra takes a sip of her wine, looks at the table, looks back at Ebony. "Yes," she says, simply, without the laugh, without the deflection, without the subject change. Just, yes. Ebony nods. Doesn't push, just nods, like this is information she's been quietly certain of all along, and is relieved to have confirmed. "What are you waiting for?" Ebony asks, and Sandra doesn't answer. because she doesn't know. Or maybe because the answer is too complicated to say out loud in the middle of a restaurant, over grilled salmon and a glass of Chardonnay. Maybe she is waiting for a sign. Maybe she is waiting for certainty, which is a thing that love almost never offers. Maybe she has been waiting so long that waiting has become the only mode she knows, the only way she knows how to be in relation to Wilson Carter. Present, devoted, silent, and just slightly out of reach. And then the reunion email arrives. Year 7. Early spring. Sandra is sitting on her couch in her Pasadena apartment, her laptop open on the coffee table, a stack of ungraded essays beside her that she is absolutely not thinking about. She opens her inbox out of reflex and sees it before she has time to brace for it. A bright, official-looking message with the UCSB logo at the top. 10-year reunion weekend. We'd love to see you. And there, in the list of confirmed attendees, scrolling past names she knows and half remembers, and some she has almost forgotten entirely, there it is. Wilson Carter. Attending. Sandra's stomach drops, then flips, then does something complicated that she does not have a medical term for. She reads the email 3 times. She sits very still. She can feel her own heartbeat in a way that she doesn't usually, and the room is doing that strange thing where everything is slightly too vivid and slightly too quiet at the same time, and she is still sitting there, still deciding what to do with this information, when her phone buzzes. Ebony. Did you see the email? Look at the attendee list. Look at it. Sandra can hear the exclamation points, even in a text message. We are going, Ebony writes. I am not missing this, and neither are you. Sandra types back, I don't know, Ebony. What if it's awkward? Ebony's response arrives in under 4 seconds. Sandra Owens, after 7 years? The awkward ship has sailed. We are going. And then Sandra does something that surprises even herself. She closes the laptop. She picks up her phone. She finds Wilson's number. She has never deleted it, not once, not even during the periods when not texting him would have been the healthier choice, and she presses call before she can talk herself out of it. The phone rings twice, 3 times, and then his voice, warm and surprised, and immediately familiar in all the ways that 7 years and 700 miles have not touched Sandra. Hey, I was just thinking about you. She closes her eyes. He was just thinking about her. 7 years. He was just thinking about her. They talk for a long time. They laugh about old memories, the midnight library, the engineering essays, the time Wilson tried to figure out what Sandra was laughing at by sneaking around the outside of the building and nearly fell into a bush. They talk easily, effortlessly, in the particular language of 2 people who have never really lost each other, even when they have tried. And somewhere in the warmth of that conversation, without either of them making a big moment of it, they agree. They will go to the reunion. They will go together. Sandra hangs up and sits in the quiet for a long time. Something is coming. She can feel it the way you feel a change in pressure before a storm. Not dread exactly, not certainty, just the unmistakable awareness that the atmosphere has shifted and the world is about to be different from what it was. 7 years of silence. 7 years of carrying something enormous and saying nothing. 7 years of mornings and late nights and shared tables and midnight libraries, and growing up in parallel, in the same direction, separated by exactly the distance of one unspoken truth. The reunion is in 2 weeks, and Sandra Owens, for the first time in 7 years, does not know what she is going to do. So let me ask you this, and I want you to think about it carefully because it matters. After 7 years of silence, after all that love and all that patience and all those small daily acts of quiet courage, does Sandra deserve to finally be seen? And more importantly, is Wilson Carter finally ready to see her? Stay with me, because what happens next will change everything. Here is the question that has been sitting underneath this entire story, waiting for the right moment to surface, and that moment is now. What happens when the person you have loved in silence for 7 years finally looks at you and sees exactly what you always hoped they would? Do you let yourself believe it? Or has the silence gone on so long that even the truth feels too good to be real? We are about to find out. Late April. Santa Barbara. The campus is dressed for the occasion in a way that feels almost deliberately cinematic. Fairy lights strung through the trees, the warm California. Evening settling over the quad like a blessing, the faint sound of waves somewhere beyond the buildings mixing with music drifting from the reunion hall. The sky is doing that particular thing it does over the California coast at golden hour, where the light turns everything slightly amber and slightly unreal, and the whole world looks like a memory you are making in real time. Sandra Owens stands outside the entrance in a teal dress that she chose carefully, and her braids styled with the same quiet attention she has always given to the details of herself that matter. She takes one long breath. The kind of breath you take before you walk into something you cannot walk back out of unchanged. She goes in. The room is everything a 10-year reunion should be, loud and warm and faintly nostalgic, full of people who look almost like the people you remember and are busy pretending the decade in between was shorter than it was. Old classmates embrace across the room. Laughter rises and falls in waves. The DJ is playing something from their college years that nobody asked for but everybody needed. The air smells like spring flowers and fresh coffee and the particular sweetness of time that has been survived. Sandra moves through it slowly, taking it in, exchanging warm greetings with faces she recognizes, smiling her bright smile. And all the while her eyes are moving through the room with a focus that has nothing to do with anyone else and everything to do with one person. She finds him before she is ready. She is never going to be ready. He is standing near the punch bowl, taller than she remembered, or maybe just more fully himself, wearing a well-tailored navy suit that makes him look exactly like the CEO the yearbook predicted, and nothing like the exhausted junior who handed her a coffee every morning without being asked. His hair is neatly trimmed. His posture has the quiet authority of a man who has spent a decade learning how to stand in rooms that expected something from him and delivering it. And then he turns, because the universe has a sense of timing, and their eyes meet across the room. The room slows down, not metaphorically, not poetically. It actually slows, the noise pulling back, the motion blurring at the edges, the whole crowded hall narrowing to this one line of sight between two people who have been circling something unspoken for 7 years. Wilson's face moves through surprise and recognition, and something warmer and more complicated, before landing on a smile so genuine it makes Sandra's chest tighten in a way that is equal parts wonderful and terrifying. He walks toward her. Of course he does. Because this is Wilson, and walking toward Sandra has always been one of the most natural things he does, even when he doesn't understand why. Sandra, he says, and her name in his voice still sounds the way it always has, like something he means. He pulls her into a hug, brief and warm, and steps back to look at her. You look incredible, he says, and the way he says it is slightly different from how he has said things like that before. Slightly more specific, slightly more present. Sandra notices. She notices everything when it comes to Wilson Carter. She always has. And you, she says, pulling herself back into the easy warmth of their particular dynamic. Look very CEO. He laughs, the real one, the one she worked for, and just like that, 7 years of distance collapses down to nothing, and they are simply themselves again, in the way that real friendship and real love both share, the ability to pick up exactly where you left off. He introduces her to the people around him. Colleagues, old classmates, new contacts blended together in the social ecosystem of a successful man at a reunion. This is Sandra Owens, he says, and the pride in his voice is unmistakable. One of my oldest and dearest friends from college. Sandra shakes hands and smiles and hears those words, oldest and dearest, and carries them the way she has always carried the things Wilson gives her without meaning to, carefully, gratefully, with the faint ache of someone who knows the gift is real, even if it is not quite the one they were hoping for. And then Ebony appears, because Ebony has always appeared at exactly the right moment, threading her arm through Sandra's with the satisfied energy of someone watching a plan come together that they have been patient about for a very long time. She is wearing an elegant black dress, and the expression of a woman who is genuinely enjoying herself. She nudges Sandra toward Wilson with the subtlety of a freight train, whispers tell him about your book, and beams at Wilson like she has known him for years, which in a way she has. Through every story Sandra has ever told her about him, she has known him for years. The evening moves forward the way evenings do when they are going somewhere important, with the unhurried momentum of something that knows it has time. Connor, a tall and good-natured classmate from group projects, drifts into their circle and talks easily with all of them. The DJ shifts to something slower. People begin moving toward the dance floor in that gradual, inevitable way. And Connor, with the uncomplicated social ease of a man who has no idea he is about to become a pivot point in someone else's love story, turns to Sandra and offers his hand. "May I have this dance?" Sandra glances at Wilson. A quick, involuntary flicker of a glance that she cannot quite stop. Wilson's expression is easy, pleasant, unreadable. Ebony's is not. Ebony's is practically a stage direction. "Go. This is part of it. Trust me." Sandra slips her hand into Connor's and lets herself be led onto the dance floor, and behind her, she does not see Wilson's easy expression shift into something else entirely. Something he does not have a name for yet. Something that feels uncomfortably like urgency. They dance. Sandra closes her eyes and lets herself simply be in the moment, the music moving through her, the fairy lights warm overhead, the sense of the whole beautiful, bittersweet evening gathering around her like water. She is graceful and present and real, and when Connor spins her gently, she laughs the real laugh. And for just these few minutes, she is not waiting for anything. She is simply here, simply herself, and it is enough. Across the room, it is not enough for Wilson. He does not understand what is happening in his own chest. He only knows that watching Sandra on that dance floor, watching her laugh, watching her move, watching someone else's hand at her waist, has produced a feeling, so immediate and so forceful that it has bypassed his considerable intellectual capacity entirely and gone straight to the part of him that acts before it thinks. He is walking toward the dance floor before the thought has fully formed. He is moving through the crowd with a focus that his board members would recognize and his college self would not have understood. His mind is running through every memory at once. The morning greetings, the midnight library, the coffee he brought without being asked, the way her name sounds in his own voice, the way the room has always felt slightly warmer, slightly more worthwhile when she is in it, and all of it is reorganizing itself around a truth that has been there the entire time, dressed up as friendship, waiting for him to catch up. Sandra opens her eyes. She finds him watching her from across the dance floor, and something in his expression, specific, searching, completely unguarded in a way she has never seen from him before, makes her heart stop and restart in the space of a single breath. Connor, perceptive and gracious, notices the look passing between them, and guides Sandra gently off the floor with the dignity of a man who understands exactly what is happening and chooses to be good about it. Wilson is already there when she steps off, just a few feet away, standing very still, looking at her the way she has dreamed of being looked at for 7 years, not as the smartest, kindest person he knows, not as his oldest and dearest friend, but as someone he is seeing, perhaps for the first time, with full, undivided, irreversible attention. The music is still playing. The room is still full of people. None of it matters at all. "Sandra," he says softly, and he takes both her hands, and his are not entirely steady. His eyes are earnest and wide open in the particular way of someone who has just understood something enormous and is still adjusting to the size of it. "You are so beautiful out there." She smiles. She trusts herself this far. "Thank you," she says. The silence that follows is not empty. It is the fullest silence Sandra has ever stood inside. 7 years of everything unsaid, pressing gently from all directions. Not demanding, just present. Just reminding her that this moment has the weight of all those other moments behind it. Wilson takes a breath. He steps closer. "I don't want to mess up this moment," he says quietly. "But I have to tell you, seeing you dance with Connor, it made something click." He pauses. His jaw works slightly, like he is being careful with the words, like they matter too much to rush. "I realized I don't want anyone else but me to be dancing with you. Sandra, Another pause, and then simply, plainly, without performance or preamble, "I think I love you." His voice shakes on the last 3 words. Just slightly, just enough. Sandra's eyes fill. She cannot help it. She has spent 7 years being strong and steady and silent, and all of that discipline simply dissolves in the warmth of those 3 words said in Wilson's voice on this particular evening under these particular lights. "Wilson," she whispers. And that is all she gets out before Ebony is beside them, because of course Ebony is beside them. Ebony has been angling toward this moment since freshman year, with quiet laughter in her voice and happy tears threatening the corners of her eyes. "So," Ebony says softly, looking between them with the satisfied wonder of someone who has waited a very long time to witness something she always knew was coming. "This is what we were waiting for." Wilson turns to her, genuinely startled. "Ebony, what? How did you?" Ebony shakes her head with a laugh. "You really had no clue," she says gently, patting his arm. And then, because Ebony has never been the kind of person to hold back the truth when the truth is exactly what is needed, Sandra has been in love with you for years. Her eyes always lit up when she talked about you. "I've known since freshman year." She gives Sandra a look full of warmth and a decade of shared knowing. "I think now you two finally know." Sandra's cheeks go a deep, beautiful red. Wilson stares at her, and she meets his eyes and nods. A small, tearful, completely unguarded nod that says everything her voice has been practicing for 7 years. Wilson shakes his head slowly, the expression of a man reckoning with the full weight of what he has missed, what was given to him so generously and so quietly for so long. He takes her face in his hands, gently, like something precious, like something he is only now understanding the value of, and says, "Oh, Sandra, I had no idea. I am so sorry I didn't see it sooner." She reaches up and brushes a tear from her cheek. "I was scared you wouldn't feel the same," she says. Her voice is steady. After all this time, her voice is steady. "I feel the same," Wilson says, and his eyes are shining. And he leans down and kisses her, first on the forehead, tender and certain, and then gently on the lips. Sandra closes her eyes and kisses him back, and the warmth of it, the rightness of it, settles over her like something she has always deserved, and finally gets to have. The applause that breaks out around them is spontaneous and genuine and slightly embarrassing and completely perfect. Connor laughs and gives Wilson a thumbs up from across the room. Ebony presses both hands to her face with tears streaming freely now, not even trying to hold them back. Wilson cannot stop smiling. He looks like a man who has just been handed back something he didn't know he'd lost. They find their way out to the patio. The Santa Barbara night is warm and quiet around them. Stars scattered overhead. The distant sound of the ocean threading through everything like a low, constant note. They hold hands on the patio railing and talk for a long time. Really talk in the way they always could, but now with nothing held back. Sandra tells him about the graduation card. He reads it under the patio lights, with his mouth pressed together and his eyes very bright. He tells her about the 2 a.m. likes and the morning texts and the phone calls that always lasted longer than they should have, and how he never let himself ask why. They laugh about all of it. They hold all of it gently between them, the way you hold something that was both painful and necessary and is now finally, gratefully over. Before they part that night, Wilson walks Sandra to her car and pulls her in for one more kiss at the edge of the parking lot under a streetlight, a real one, unhurried, certain. "Dinner tomorrow?" he asks against her hair. "I know a place with the best tacos in town." She grins up at him, and it is the most uncomplicated grin she has worn in 7 years. "I would love that," she says. He squeezes her hand. "Good night, Sandra." "Good night, Wilson." She drives home with the windows down and the warm California night rushing through the car, and she laughs softly to herself, the real laugh, the unstoppable one, because after all of it, after all those years and all those almost moments and all that patient, faithful, quietly heroic silence, he knows. He finally knows. And it is so much sweeter than she imagined, so much realer, so much more worth every single day of the wait. What follows is not a fairy tale, and that is exactly what makes it beautiful. It is 2 real people choosing each other deliberately every day with full knowledge of who the other person actually is. Wilson shows up the next morning in a vintage Jeep with the top down and wildflowers from the market, and Sandra's eyes light up in the way that Ebony always described to anyone who would listen. They share burgers and orange cream soda at a small beachside cafe and laugh until their faces hurt. They hike through redwood forests in Santa Cruz. They get silly at Dodger games in LA. Wilson learns Sandra's favorite songs and plays them on the car radio on the drive up the coast. Sandra writes him poems and leaves them in his suitcase, on his nightstand, folded into his jacket pockets like small, warm surprises. They are building something out of the best material in the world, years of genuine knowing, layered carefully into something that will hold. Wilson meets her family at Thanksgiving. He sits at the table in the Los Angeles house where gospel music once played softly in the background, and Sandra grew up learning what love looks like as a daily practice, and he toasts Sandra with cranberry juice, while her grandmother watches with bright, satisfied eyes. He learns to make peach cobbler over her grandmother's shoulder and gets flour on his shirt and laughs about it. A month later, Sandra meets his family at the annual chili cookout in San Jose, and his mother makes cornbread that reminds her of Sunday suppers, and she is welcomed with the easy warmth of people who can see plainly that their son has finally found his way to the right person. Each family gathering deepens what they are building. Each ordinary Sunday makes it more real. One evening, at the end of that first summer, they walk along the beach at sunset, the same California coastline that has been the backdrop of so much of their story, and the sky is all pink and orange and quietly spectacular. Wilson pulls Sandra close and breathes in the salt air and says, "Remember that night at the reunion?" Sandra rests her head on his shoulder. "I'll never forget it," she says. He takes her hand. "Seeing you on that dance floor made me realize I don't ever want to feel jealous of anyone else with you," he says. "I will never take you for granted, Sandra." She looks up at him with eyes that have been waiting to look at him exactly like this for a long time. "Me neither," she says. And they stand in the quiet and let the waves say the rest. A year later, on that very beach, they get married. The sun sets in their favorite colors. Ebony stands as the officiant, beaming with the pride of someone who has earned the right to say, "I told you so," and is too happy to bother. Family surrounds them. Gospel music and barbecue and cornbread and peach cobbler, all somehow present in the atmosphere of the day, the combined warmth of two families who always had room for each other. Wilson slips the ring on Sandra's finger with steady hands and eyes that do not leave hers. Sandra does the same for him. They seal their vows with a kiss and dance barefoot in the sand under the fairy lights, while the Pacific crashes its applause behind them. And somewhere in the middle of that dance, Sandra closes her eyes and simply exists inside the moment, fully, completely, without reservation, without fear, without anything held back. This is what she waited for. Not the wedding, not the ring, not even the words spoken under the lights on the reunion dance floor. She waited for this, the ordinary, extraordinary dailiness of being fully known and fully chosen, of loving someone and being loved back in equal measure, of waking up each morning to the life you quietly believed was possible even when nothing around you confirmed it. This is the destination that patience and courage and an enormous faithful heart will take you to if you are willing to hold on long enough. And the thing Sandra and Wilson say to their younger friends, the thing they tell the people who come to them with quiet, complicated loves of their own, is this: the greatest love is not always the loudest one. Sometimes it is the one that has been beside you the whole time, in the morning greetings and the midnight libraries, and the cups of coffee brought without being asked. Sometimes the person you are supposed to love is already your best friend. And sometimes the bravest thing you will ever do is say out loud the true thing you have been carrying in silence. All it takes is a little faith, a little patience, and when the moment finally arrives, and it will arrive, the courage to stop letting the fear of no keep you from the possibility of yes. Now, before I let you go, I want to ask you something, and I genuinely want to know your answer. Have you ever loved someone in silence, the way Sandra loved Wilson? Have you ever carried a feeling so carefully and so long that it simply became part of how you moved through the world? Or maybe you are on the other side of this story, the Wilson side, and somewhere in the back of your mind there is someone you have been taking for granted, Someone whose constancy you have accepted without ever asking yourself what it means. Someone who might just be your Sandra. If this story moved you, if Sandra's patience, and Wilson's awakening, and Ebony's loyalty, and this whole beautiful, human, deeply American story of love found in the most ordinary, extraordinary place got to you the way I think it did, then do something with that feeling. Drop a comment below and tell me, are you a Sandra or a Wilson? Have you ever had a love like this? Are you in one right now? Your story matters, and this community wants to hear it. Hit that like button if you believe that real love is worth waiting for. Share this with the person in your life who needs to hear it, the one who is carrying something quietly, or the one who might just need a reunion and a dance floor to finally see what has been in front of them all along. And subscribe, because every week we bring you stories like this one, real, human, American stories about the courage it takes to love and be loved, and build something true in this complicated, beautiful life. Sandra waited 7 years. The least you can do is hit subscribe.